Hi, this is Emily Saliers from Indigo Girls, and you're listening to Rainbow Country.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the persons appearing on the program.
Today on Rainbow Country, coverage of the 48th edition of the Toronto International Film Festival continues, and on this episode, we'll hear from filmmakers of some queer films like National Anthem and Frybread Face and Me. Plus, meet the Progranmers with Jason Ryle, international programmer, Indigenous Cinema. That and more in episode 371, so stay tuned for Gay Talk Radio right here on Rainbow Country.
Hi, this is Carol Pope.
Hi, I'm Garrett Conley, author of Boy Erased, a memoir.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Segato.
Hi, I'm Gord Depp with the Spoons. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new journey through Rainbow Country. As I like to call it, a little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. And as always, I am your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm producer and host, Mark Tara. By the way, Rainbow Country originates from CIUT FM in Toronto, and now proudly in syndication on 12 outlets across Canada, from coast to coast to coast. The Yukon, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the east coast of Canada in Newfoundland, Ontario, even down to Buffalo, New York, and online. Well, thanks to you tuning in, streaming, downloading, but ultimately listening. Together, we continue to build Rainbow Country into a nationally syndicated gay radio show, a #1 LGBT podcast on Podomatic.com's Gay and Lesbian chart, as well as being recognized as Canada's #1 LGBT podcast on Feedspot.com. So today, I have 2 on-location interviews with the filmmakers of a couple of LGBT films. We'll hear from director Luke Guilford and actor Charlie Plummer, who joined me to talk about their new LGBT film, National Anthem, a movie that tells a country western queer trans story. Plus, Frybread Face and Me, a movie that tells a Navajo Nation story about family dynamics, queer identity, and more. This film is from executive producer Taika Waititi, and my on-location interview is with the film's writer and director, Billy Luther. Plus, meet the Progranmers. Today, Jason Ryle, international programmer, Indigenous Cinema. Plus, in hour 2, music from LGBT artists, independent artists, voices that we've come to know and love in classic disco, classic 80s, classic house. And on this episode, I'm featuring some classic house, some queer calypso, and more. All that lies ahead as we start Journey 371 through Rainbow Country. And our first stop, the Rainbow Country Bookstore. Today, novelist and screenwriter Melanie Metzner reads from her latest novel, Slow Reveal, a novel about a lesbian affair, emotional infidelity, addiction, and the creative process. By the way, Slow Reveal is available wherever you get your favorite books, and on Amazon.ca it has a perfect score of 5 out of 5 stars.
Naomi drifted off to the dark well of longing for those snowy nights in East Marion, where she paced, reciting her work to Catherine, before ravishing her on the living room floor as the last of the embers in the fireplace extinguished. Shut out from the rest of their lives, shut down, yet gloriously open to the moment, which lingered on endlessly, as though the entirety of their existence were encapsulated in a single instant. She left the reading at St. Mark's Church, crossed Avenue A near First, spotted a phone booth and stopped. In the short space of time she could talk herself out of the urgency, she stepped up to the receiver. Catherine answered, but at first she didn't hear Naomi's voice over the din of traffic. "It's me. I'm out on the street in the East Village," she said. "Something wrong? I haven't heard from you. Not that you're under any obligation to stay in touch, but I want to be there for you, Katie. Be there in a way that might be, I don't know, beneficial. You sound like a doctor." Naomi realized how calculating she was, the way passion shape changed into need, then shape changed into something more desperate, a false narrative projected onto the object of desire in the form of support. One thing she knew for sure: woman, when faced with another woman, could not escape the truth. "I wanted to check on you. I'm all right, I guess. I don't know." Catherine moved through her uncorrupted. "Okay, I'll admit it. I needed to hear your voice." "Look, I have to go," Catherine said. She was on the floor of the walk-in, surrounded by small paintings on paper. "I'm making an inventory of Jonathan's work, for his retrospective." Why did she have to mention him? Here she was, trapped by the longing, caught in the net, snared, while Catherine was back in the closet, comforted by a ghost, the part of Jonathan she loved and admired, the legacy he left behind. Death was a form of black magic, the way it clutched survivors in its grip. All mortal acts attained a kind of immortality through the recognition by others. The dying mortal, but the death immortalized. The artist mortal, but the art immortalized. This act we call life, the very definition of mortality, immortalized through every appeal, every retreat, every request, and every confession. What arrogance, the very idea that Catherine's function was to serve her own, as if all relationships served that purpose. Something was seriously wrong with that line of reasoning, passionless and bloody. Naomi didn't like messes she couldn't clean up with her deft handling of language. Had she viewed their relationship as immortal, as if it would never perish? Or was she busy building a security force to hide behind, an armed one to keep out intruders, especially dead ones? She looked at the sign "Vin" in block letters written across the shop window. Racks of French and Italian wines lined the floor-to-ceiling walls. She remembered that unctuous Côte Rôtie after cycling 36 miles around the fluvial terraces of the Rhone Valley, what seemed like a million summers ago. 2 weeks of uninterrupted bliss, riding hard by day, against the bleached-out sun, grapes glistening on the vines, that year producing a superior vintage. Basking in the eerie glow of candelabras and castles en route, where they dined in cellars and slept in medieval rooms with stone fireplaces. On one particular stormy night, the last one of their trip, they huddled in front of a roaring fire, and Catherine admitted she was missing Jonathan, that she didn't feel free of him, that he was ingrained in her like a genetic imprint. Devastated by her confession, Naomi hoped she wouldn't hear the same lamentation recounted over a candlelit dinner, this time at her loft. That is, if ever they were reunited. She was feeling possessive. If she didn't protect the relationship, no one would. Seduced by love, then slaughtered by it. That's how she envisioned the outcome if she allowed herself to go that far. Naomi tried on every jacket and every pair of pants hanging in her cramped closet. Her indecision had nothing to do with vanity, but in some perverse way, she would replace Jonathan at his own memorial service. Attending wasn't her idea. Catherine insisted on it. She needed her there, but never explained why. The macabre image of funerals as weekly tributes triggered that dreadful time in her life. She'd been to so many over the years for friends and artists who died of cancer and AIDS. They were her peers, just like Jonathan, not her elders. Death, unlike life, had become a close friend, intimate, dependable, remarkable in ways. Someone she could trust, someone who reliably showed up only after a brief absence and never lacked enthusiasm for her own personal struggle. This, she said, dangling the leather harness she used to seduce Catherine, is completely inappropriate. Therefore, I will wear it fully accessorized. Her somber mood was broken by this crazy gesture, the inanity of it all. She imagined cutting through the crowd of mourners yelling, "Thou art art," pointing to the urn of Jonathan's ashes. Cruel and unbecoming, yes, but honest. Why weren't people honest anymore? Have lies been told so often they now appeared absolute and irrefutable? She dropped the brief she planned to wear, walked into the living room sporting her harness, and over to the window, where she pulled up the shades and yelled, "Cocks and crows be damned, I stand before thee naked, a woman, a man, a monster." And she cackled and crowed maddeningly before whisking a bottle off the cabinet, lifting the cork and guzzling it down, then spraying her woolen rug with a shower of ruby wine, rubbing it in for good measure with the heel of her bare foot. Sick and tired of the tidy lies, she fixated on the stain. There will be no more deception between us. In Catherine's absence, she could not dispute her claim. The act revitalized her, and her dynamism returned. She acknowledged the pulsating rhythm of her sex locked up in a harness, felt the energy bound up and turned inward. She wasn't fixed in a singular mindset about what makes a man, what makes a woman. To her, it was not the body or the genitals, but the orientation of energy. It hadn't been easy, not because of her identity, but because of her disorientation around gender, like those little icons stuck on the walls of public toilets, indicating which door to use. She rarely interpreted the symbols correctly. They made no sense, which accounted for the way she often walked blindly into the wrong bathroom. As if there were no subtleties in the evolution of the human race. We must define, we must confine. She glanced at the clock over the kitchen stove and dashed into the bedroom to dress. If she didn't pull herself together, she'd be late for the memorial service. She wanted to be there on time, even though she knew her presence would probably make things worse, and she hated herself, their relationship, for that.
Hi, everybody. This is Gino Vanelli. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Up next, my on-location interview with director Luke Guilford and actor Charlie Plummer, who talk about their new film, National Anthem. Luke Guilford, hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am well. Charlie Plummer, hello. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I have to say to the two of you, thank you for being here to have your voices, your stories be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for that, especially to talk about your new film, National Anthem. Luke, you co-wrote the script, you directed, you executive produced it. Talk to me about the story that you're telling in National Anthem. Let's start there.
Well, National Anthem is a Western for the New World. It's a love story.
What kind of a love story?
It's a coming-of-age love story. Where
is it fair to say that it might even be a trans love story?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, well, it's told through the experience of Dylan, who's a 21-year-old construction worker in New Mexico. He gets a gig working at the House of Splendor, which is a homestead built by a community of queer ranchers and rodeo performers. And once he's there, he finally in his life has the opportunity to explore himself and to discover these multitudes within himself that he didn't know yet existed, and also falls in love with Sky, who's a trans woman and a beautiful, powerful leader within the community. She's a barrel racer. And she sort of welcomes him into the community. And there's a very diverse group of characters. She's trans. There's a drag queen there who becomes very close with Dylan's character as well. And a lot of these people are real folks within the queer rodeo community too, within that were on the House of Splendor. So, but it's also a story about finding oneself, and loving oneself, and the beginning of the rest of our lives.
Well said, well said. So, Charlie, tell me about yourself playing Dylan, and what was it about this project that you wanted to get on board? You wanted to be part of National Anthem. Why did you want to be part of this?
Well, Luke and I first met when I was, I think, 18, doing a photo shoot in Venice, and we connected then, and hadn't spoken for a while, but I had worked with the producers on a different film, and they had reached out to me saying they had this incredibly special script that they just had this opportunity to acquire, and this incredibly special photographer, filmmaker, who they thought maybe I had heard of. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, I know Luke. And it made me so happy to see that he was transitioning into film and taking that really seriously. And immediately that night I read the script and I just devoured it and loved it. I mean, really from the first few pages. And then I think that night or maybe the day after, Luke and I got on the phone and just spoke for maybe 3 hours and just kind of gave each other so much in terms of, he gave me so much in terms of his connection to the story and where it came from and his understanding of the character to that point. And then he really allowed me room to also give my ideas. And that was really the beginning of this incredible collaboration. I've never had a director trust me as much as Luke trusted me in this process. And that really began from the first conversation. So I think after that first conversation, it was just such a no-brainer, and it became something that I really wanted to fight to make happen and fight to get made. And I'm so, so, so grateful we got to do that.
Well said. Okay, Luke, National Anthem, America's Queer Rodeo. This was an exhibit of your photography. So talk to me about this exhibit of still photos becoming this full-length motion picture of moving images. Talk to me about that genesis. How did that idea come to you? Was it a suggestion to make that exhibit into a motion picture? Talk to me about that.
It was not a suggestion. It was a pull from the universe telling me that this is a bigger story than can be contained in photographs. As I was working on it was a book that became an exhibition. So as I was working on the book, which took years, I started in 2016. The book came out in 2020. So it was a 4-year project. And I would say at least just like a year into making the photos, I realized, as I'm having all these conversations with the people that are in the book that are from this community, there's just so many stories that are so moving and so inspiring. There's so much resilience. There's so much beauty. There's so much.
Did you interview your subjects as well?
Yeah. Not in a formal way, but in a we're connecting as human beings kind of way, also to build trust within the community. And I became friends with people and just naturally through that process learned their stories. So many of them have very universal stories that I identified with around family and loss and grief, of course, but also as I said, resilience and beauty and living on these homesteads with animals and children. And it's a very warm, welcoming community. And I hadn't seen stories like this represented, and it felt like there was just so much hope. And so, yeah, it just felt very organic to start writing some of this down. And of course I started thinking about it first as maybe a documentary, but then I feel like that there can be so much ghettoization of queer stories in the doc space. that I wanted to like raise it up and give it more of a spotlight than that. So it became a script, and that was the first script I ever wrote, with a friend from college who's a super talented screenwriter, David Largeman Murray. And our friend Kevin Best came on. It was like a very a huge community project in that way of like that film is just so many people coming together with a dream. And so yeah, that's kind of how it very organically grew from photos to a movie.
How many of the subjects that you did for the book and the exhibition are in the film?
So many. I mean, when Dylan, Charlie's character, goes to the rodeo for the first time, there's so many folks. I mean, it was like my favorite rodeo we went to. It was our first day of shooting. 2 months before we started principal photography, we just went to a rodeo with a Splinter crew, and it was truly both Charlie and Dylan's first time at the rodeo, and he got on a bull that very first day. Like, it was an incredible just to dive straight into the deep end. I gained so much respect for him as a collaborator and artist, and it was just the most beautiful way to start the project. But it was truly him just going to the rodeo for the first time and meeting all these people, and us bringing so many of the folks from the book into the fold of the project.
So, Charlie, talk to me about playing Dylan. How do you see him? Do you think that Dylan is someone who is maybe insecure about his sexuality, maybe insecure about his surroundings? How do you see him, the character?
Yeah, I think, Dylan is of course a complex person, but I think something that Luke and I spoke a lot about, where we meet Dylan at the beginning of the story, he is kind of trapped in these circumstances. And maybe trapped is too intense of a word, but, with the people he loves, with his mother and with his little brother, he feels a responsibility to them, to take care of them, to be with them, and therefore almost a responsibility to let go of his life and his individuality. And so I think, he almost uses the excuse of the responsibility as a way to not take on that task of fully embracing himself and exploring himself. And I think he's moderately content with that, but I think if he wouldn't meet these wonderful people and connect with the House of Splendor, then it could be, years before he actually begins to break that ground with himself. So I think as much as he's insecure, I think there is a big part of him who, is secure in himself. And I think what's beautiful about this story, and something that Luke and I spoke about, is as much as the identity that he, has is changing throughout the film, it really is only expanding. The person that he is at the beginning of the film is just as much of the person he is at the end of the film. He's just allowed more of himself in. And I think that's really significant, and something that, very early on I thought I just really respected about what Luke wanted to do with this film and with this character, and just witnessing characters that go through that growth. Because I think we do see coming of age films often, but, the nuances that happen in this film for this character, I think are really, really special. So, yeah.
So, Luke, do you think you have a background in photography, in music videos, in short films, now feature-length films? Do you think that, and they all have to do with imagery, do you think, as there's a saying that, when it comes to photography, like, you have to have the eye, right? When it comes to photography, like the photographer has an eye, a certain eye, that sort of thing. Do you think you have a certain look to your projects, a certain aesthetic to your imagery, whether it's stills or music video or a feature-length film? Do you think you have a certain look to your projects?
It's an interesting question. What drew me to photography in the first place is storytelling, actually. I originally wanted to be a photojournalist, photographer, like a Magnum photographer. I really respect that type of work that's more storytelling through images with communities, and I love that type of work. And I kind of got, just in terms of to like pay the bills, I sort of got into other types of photography But I think that thematically, and because I went to art school, I think conceptually when it comes to making images and making art. So to me, it's always about intimacy, and soulfulness too are the things that draw me in. And I think that the eye, or the aesthetic side of it, is something that it comes instinctually. So it's not something I think too much about. It just comes organically, but it's more of the process of building intimacy, and pulling out a sort of soulfulness from the subjects, whether it's, Christina Aguilera, Pamela Anderson, or the queer rodeo community. So, yeah.
So my last question for the two of you, what do you hope audiences come away with after they've seen National Anthem? It's hope.
I think that's the most concise way to say it. I think that we're living in a very scary time for so many people. It's always dangerous to be a queer person in the world. Survival is such an integral part to being queer, unfortunately. I hope that both queer and non-queer people come away from it with hope for how to build bridges to one another, empathy for one another. To me, that's the most beautiful part of storytelling, and I hope that that's something that people are inspired to feel.
And Charlie, what do you hope audiences come away with?
I mean, that was a pretty great answer. I don't know how best to follow that up, but I think I hope that the film does feel like a celebration for people and allows for people to feel safe and understood, but also just joy. I mean, I think it is a joyful film, and it's hard to say that about a lot of movies now, in which that's coming from a genuine place, not a falsified place. So I do think that that's something that I'm really proud of about this film, but I think Luke said it best. So I'll go with his answer.
Well said, well said. Charlie, Luke, thank you for your time. Thanks for being on the show. Well
Thank
made.
you.
Well made. Great film.
Such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for having us.
National Anthem had its international premiere at this year's Toronto International Film Festival. The film is currently doing the film festival circuit scene, but keep your ears and eyes open when National Anthem does hit streaming.
Hi, I'm Garrett Conley, author of Boy Erased, a memoir. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Up next, meet the Progranmers with Jason Ryle, international programmer, Indigenous Cinema. Jason, hi, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Mark.
So you are a programmer at TIFF. Tell me what you program. What specific program is it?
My official title is International Programmer, Indigenous Cinema. So my focus is on Indigenous-made, Indigenous-directed feature films by Indigenous filmmakers from outside of Canada, non-Canadians.
And how many seasons, how many years have you been part of TIFF?
Well, I've been a part of TIFF for a very long time as an audience goer. I've loved the festival since I first moved to Toronto back in the 90s. I've worked with TIFF as a partner festival when I ran Imaginative for all those years up until 2020. And I've been a programmer now for 2 years. So this is my second festival with TIFF, inside the house.
You're also part of the LGBT community. So talk to me about, we were talking about this sort of off mic. We're talking about seeing films through a queer lens. I'm openly gay. Talk to me about being a programmer and also someone who's part of the LGBT community, and the type of films that you tend to be attracted to when you are looking to program the festival. Talk to me about that.
Absolutely. I mean, that lens is always inseparable from who I am and in terms of how I watch things. In the same way as an Anishinaabe person, as a First Nations person, that's really intrinsic to who I am, my life experience, my lens as a programmer. And I think that's one of the really wonderful things about the collective programming team at TIFF is its diversity. So many people with a diversity of lived experiences, which I think really just creates this incredible fabric at the festival. We all have different experiences. We all approach films in very different ways. I mean, for me, it's always about that connection to story and an authenticity of place. Really looking at it from an Indigenous point of view, which is, I think, one of my first sort of points of view in terms of like the films I watch because of my section. Really looking to see how I think these films inhabit a space that's creatively different from what's come before, really significant to the nations that they represent, but also like have stories that I think really reach broader audiences. In the same way as a gay person, I mean, that's something that's really important to me too, to kind of bring forward films that sort of have representation. And I think we need to see more films from our communities, more Two-Spirit, more queer films from around the world, particularly from Indigenous filmmakers. Back in the early days of Imaginative, it was such a queer space. And, we really, I think, have seen not necessarily a drop-off, but I'd like to see more support across the board around the world for support for queer filmmakers from the Indigenous community, because these are the films I really want to see more of. We have 2 wonderful films this year by Indigenous queer directors. The films themselves aren't necessarily queer content, but certainly part of the larger fabric of Indigenous queer cinema.
So what are those films?
So the first one is this wonderful second feature called Valentina or the Serenity, which is from Mexico, and the director is Angeles Cruz. This is her second feature film. It's this incredible story of a young girl who refuses to believe that her father has passed away and really holds this like unwavering optimism that he's going to return. But ultimately, it's a story of her coming to terms with grief and kind of the immensity of realizing the loss that she's experiencing, and how really the power of love can just uplift the struggles that she's going with. It's absolutely beautiful. It's really one of the hidden gems of the festival. And the other is Billy Luther's Frybread, Face and Me, which is a comedy drama, executive produced by Taika Waititi. And Billy is another rising creative force in Native America. He's a writer, he's a director, incredibly funny, and someone I'm just very happy to have as part of the festival.
What do you think makes a good programmer? What makes a good programmer?
I think empathy. I think a generosity of spirit. I think both of those are really essential. I think loving film is certainly an essential starting point. Just really having a desire and a curiosity to understand where the filmmakers are coming from. But also, I think just having an openness to the kinds of stories that these filmmakers are telling. And I think, for us, when we were at Imaginative and in the context of Indigenous cinema, our cinema is a continuation of, the storytelling tradition that's existed for millennia that all our cultures have had, all our cultures worldwide have had, not just Indigenous. And I think that's why we're still drawn to the cinema, all of us, to share these stories together. And so I think for us as programmers, really having an eye to those wonderful stories and stories that bring people together, that entertain, that enlighten, that make us cry, that make us laugh, I take so much joy from that.
How did you fall in love with film in the first place? Do you have a background as an actor, as an up-and-coming filmmaker? How did you fall in love with film originally? Talk to me about that. I'm not no background in that. I've always loved film. I remember actually when I was very young, when we were still on the reserve, my mom told me this story about how she watched Dr. Zhivago on a sheet in this flying community that she was working in northern Manitoba. And for some reason, just that image just always really stuck with me. And so watching films on TV or VHS when I was younger, it took a while before we went to the cinema, really. I think Star Wars, or The Return of the Jedi was the first film that I remember seeing in cinema.
And that just had such a huge impact on me. And had always actually wanted to pursue a career in film somehow. But I think just the experience that I had, I just didn't see a path forward in that. And actually my involvement within the community was a bit of happenstance. When I finished university 20 years ago, my boss at the time, my first boss, was a board member of Imaginative. And I became involved with the organization through her. And so really it was a direct line from then to what I'm doing now. But film has always just been a part of, what I love and what I take pleasure in and how I like to spend my time.
As a programmer at TIFF, right now as we're speaking, there's a strike on in America, the Hollywood strike. Has that strike impacted you as a programmer programming TIFF 2023?
My section, I think, has been not so much affected by the strikes in America. I mean, a lot of my films are looking internationally from there, outside of the States. Frybread, Face and Me is an American film, but it's not part of one of the struck companies, so very happy that Billy's coming. But it's something, of course, certainly respect the writers and the actors' right to strike. And so, we still have an incredible lineup here at TIFF. Most of our films are from outside the Hollywood studio system. And
will those filmmakers be coming this year?
A lot of them are. I think there's sort of like a mixed bag in terms of what they are. There's sort of like a lot of considerations, I think, in terms of what's happening. There's a lot of nuance when it comes to things like strike action, of course. So SAG-AFTRA has been very supportive, I think, of those teams who do have avenue to promote their films here. But again, it's really a case-by-case basis in terms of the films that they're having.
So my last question for you, what does TIFF mean to you?
TIFF means to me bringing people together. I mean, I really think that not only TIFF is so important for our city, but it really is a national treasure. I mean, this is such an incredible festival internationally that just represents who we are as a city and the diversity of who we are. And there's so much beauty in that. Every time I travel, it always strikes me how unique Toronto is in terms of its diversity. And I know few organizations that just represent that so wholly than we do at TIFF.
Well said, Jason. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mark.
For your year-round film fix, whether it's in Toronto at the TIFF Bell Lightbox or streaming nationally across Canada, tiff.net.
Hitmakers is a full-service, award-winning record label and social enterprise based in Iqaluit, Nunavut. We specialize in the creating and marketing of world-class Inuit and Indigenous music, including pop, hip-hop, rock, folk, and traditional Inuit music. Hitmakers has studios in Iqaluit, Ottawa, and Toronto. The label currently works with more than 20 Inuit and Indigenous artists, and we represent and promote many more. The company was founded in 2016, and our mission is to create viable careers in the arts for Inuit and Indigenous artists through music, media, and education. Our secondary mission is to empower artists to share and strengthen their stories and culture. To learn more, please connect with us on social media or at hitmakers.com. That's Hitmakers with a Z. Thanks for listening. Koyanami.
Hi, I'm Cameron Bailey, Artistic Director and Co-Head of TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Up next, my on-location interview with director Billy Luther, who joins me to talk about his new movie, Frybread, Face and Me. Billy Luther, hi, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you.
I have to say thank you for being here, to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for that, especially to talk about your new film, a powerful new film, Frybread, Face and Me. I've seen your film, and I said what I'm about to say to you to Oscar-winning stunt coordinator who did the stunts for Ford v Ferrari that came out in 2018. So I said what I said to him, I'm going to say to you. I saw your film. And I have to say, I did not like your film.
Oh, really?
Yes, I did not like your film.
Okay.
I loved your film.
Okay.
I loved it. I cried. I laughed. I ruined my makeup, so thank you for that. You wrote this film. You directed this film. You executive produced it as well. Talk to me about the story that you're telling in this film. What's the story that you're getting at?
Well, one of the reasons why I kind of made this leap, because my past has been in nonfiction, in documentary. But I always had this story about this young kid, which is basically my story. I grew up in San Diego, and every summer I would get, shipped off to my grandmother's. And it was such a unique experience that as a young age, I didn't like it. I was like, oh my God, I want to stay in the city for my summer. And because my grandmother had no running water, no electricity. But, it was like a week maybe after that of being at my grandmother's and just having that experience being with her really kind of, now that I'm older, it was an incredible experience. It was, I look at it now and being like, I was so fortunate to have those moments with her. But yeah, I just wanted to tell a story from a perspective of this young, protagonist, and who's really, still experiencing life. And, when you grow up, you have parents who don't really speak the truth, and they're living their own world and drama. So I didn't realize what they were going through. It took me, I'm on my 40s now, and I had to be an adult. I had to grow into an adult. I had to have kids to really understand what my parents went through. So the film is really centered on this family of dysfunction but love. There was a lot of love. And I think that was missing in a lot of Native films that I was watching growing up. And it just kind of was a journey that was not too hard to write,
Why was it important for you to tell this story now?
I just, I think in terms of like, representation was one of the things when I was growing up. I didn't see many Native films as a kid. And if I did, like I said, there was no humor. There was no joy of the community, the family. So I just, my humor, I write, a lot of, with my films have a lot of humor, but also a lot of heart and the traumas that we don't talk about, I feel like, having, like I said, having kids, I wanted my kids to see a film that they could watch over and over, and I can't wait for the Native audiences to see it finally. And that's huge.
Throughout the film, there are home movies shown. Are those your home movies?
Yeah.
Your family's home movies?
Yeah. My dad, had this, old, camera, and he would all of our, events and the things that we did, and they
You even showed the rug.
Yes, that was the act. Yeah, so I was going through. My parents moved a lot, so I was just going through all this archives, and there were these reels of film, and I said, I'm going to go take them and get them, processed. And once I did, it was like, oh my gosh, was lost, and it wasn't originally going to be in the film. It was, it was just something I found because I felt like I needed something, some sort of connection to this story that is also my story. But when I found that footage of the rug that our grandmother, the actor, she was, weaving a rug. I said, this is the rug I want you to weave. This is like, it was a photo. And the actual rug is in the final film too, the finished rug that we see at the end. But when I found that footage of my grandmother's rug, and I'm in that, in that film too, my cousins and my uncle, it just was, it was it. And I knew I had to put that in, and yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the cousins, the two young cousins. Mm-hmm. Actor Keir Tallman plays Benny.
Mm-hmm.
and actress Charlie Hogan.
Hogan, yeah.
Hogan plays Frybread Face.
Yeah.
Okay. They're amazing.
Uh-huh.
Talk to me about the process of finding those pivotal roles and those actors, because they carry this film and they're incredible.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that process of casting those two in particular.
Yeah, we had a great casting director, Angelique Midthunder. She cast Reservation Dogs. And so she had her hand in, a lot of kids. So when we reached out to her, she, said, hey, this is, so we found Keir that way. And we had an open call. Charlie Hogan read for Frybread. And I knew when I saw her audition, I was like, that's who I want. And it's her first film. And the chemistry of the two too was powerful, and we shot during the height of the pandemic. So, our rehearsals were all done on Zoom. So I couldn't, navigate like their chemistry that well. And cause as an actor, you need eye contact, you need, there's a physical
and
chemistry.
The energies in the
room.
Yeah.
And so it was like a risk that we had to take, even with all the other actors too. And, I would never, suggest anybody do it that way, but that's what we had to do. That's what we were working with. But she shined, and it really was something that and they connected with the grandmother too. That was a huge thing. It's like and they had a connection, even with all the aunts and uncles. But they were an amazing pair. And Taika, who executive produced this film, really kind of like, a week before we started filming, he works with a lot of kids in his, past work, and sometimes first-time actors. So he gave me some really great advice on working with kids, first-time actors, that, I'll always keep, to myself, because it's a secret that I want to keep. But he's just been a great, help with, Native producers and directors, and so
Okay, so Benny plays with action figures, dolls. Told to be a man.
Yeah,
you'll never be a man. Be a man. I even think, I'm going off memory, but I believe like his uncle calls him a faggot or something at some point in the film. How much of you is in Benny?
Yeah, there's it's me. It's me. I had G.I. Joe dolls. The actual G.I. Joe dolls that are in the film are mine. So,
really?
Yeah. And I just told him, this is, I would play soap operas with them. My parents or my dad would be like, oh, you like playing with G.I. Joes? Yes. I couldn't ask for Barbie dolls. They were like, so he would buy me, G.I. Joe dolls. But in the backyard, I would have soap opera stories, love stories with these, these dolls or these action figures. And then also growing up too, when I was, back at that time, I mean, I think kids still at this age, but you're not accepted, you're called a faggot. There was days that I would go to school and that was like a common thing with, just being different and unique. So it was just, as a kid, that stings, and that's something that hurts, especially with being called out with somebody you love and should, respect and keep you away from harm or hurt. So, these were things that I kind of, really wanted to sprinkle in the film is those moments that hurt, and also the joys of being a Native youth.
There's a scene in the film when the two cousins are dancing. He brings out the ghetto blaster and they put on skirts and they're dancing. And I love that scene. I remember watching my sister when I was really young dancing to Caribbean music. She was part of a dance troupe back in the Caribbean. And she was wearing these skirts, and we're all wearing these same skirts. And I remember I wanted to wear that skirt so badly. I never did. The title, Frybread, Face and Me. Where does this title come from?
It's, your uncles, your aunts, when you're growing up, Frybread face was just kind of a nickname they would give to people, to young kids who, had a
like
round
that
face.
Specific name?
Yeah,
really.
like Frybread face, and it's a story about these two kids, Frybread face and me, and I've had a few cousins who are kind of like a combination, so that's what kind of like inspired me to create this character. I grew up in the city, so when I went to the reservation, I was so in awe of my younger cousins who spoke fluent Navajo and knew the ways of life, knew the culture. But they were also very interested in my world, SeaWorld, Shamu, and all of that. They're like, what do you do? And do you surf every day? And so I just wanted to have a story of like these two kids and how much this young woman changed his life. Not just her, but like, the family did too, but it was just these two kids, in the summer. So I've had, it's a tongue twister, everyone's like, whenever I'm out and about here at TIFF, everyone's like, what's your film? I say Frybread face. What? Like, many producers wanted me to change it and I just stuck with it because.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
2007, Imaginative Film and Media Arts Festival, honorable mention, Best Documentary winner, Miss Navajo. Receiving that award, getting that award. What did that mean to you, getting that award?
It was my first film. It was my first documentary. And it toured, it had a world premiere at Sundance. And as a first-time filmmaker, to have an incredible life with the film festival, journey, getting that award, especially within my own Indigenous community, was big, and I think that one of those things that I love about going to these smaller Indigenous festivals, Imaginative's probably the largest one in the world, if that, but it really felt like
Did it make you feel as if you were on the right track? Did you feel validated?
Validated in a sense that people were like, "Now, what's your next project?" Wow. So it helps in that way, Mm-hmm. But I don't make films for that. I currently with this film, I when festivals ask, for me for awards and jury awards, I want it out of competition because I just, for me, it's about the audience. That's what and who I want to be, to please is the audiences. And, yeah.
Random question. Was your mother a Miss Navajo in the 1960s?
Yeah. Well, that's what inspired me to make the film, I was writing a script based on her life. She grew up in the boarding schools on the reservation where she was completely stripped of her identity, her culture, told to cut her hair, told not to speak English or Navajo. And I just thought that world in the 60s, but also the reason why she ran for Miss Navajo was to kind of say, hey, I still have my culture instilled in me. I still have my language. So my script kind of evolved, and then I was doing the research, and I started talking to a lot of other Miss Navajos within 50 years of the pageant happening at that time. And once that, I started getting these interviews of all these women and their experience. They were all so different, and I just kind of like put the script down and said, I'm making a documentary because these women need to speak for themselves. And that's kind of what happened is like all the interviews that I did as research are in the film, but it was my first doc. And after that, I started working in documentaries for, like I said, 15 years. But I needed to make a living, and working in the doc world, you're not really going to, get much, but I loved working on narrative film, but my heart is still with docs too.
So my last question for you: what do you hope audiences come away with after they've seen Frybread, Face, and Me?
Well, hopefully they can speak it. Hopefully they can say the title, but the joy of childhood. I think all of us have this unique experience. We're as much as we grow and turn 40 and 50. we're still that 11-year-old kid. And I think that's what kind of resonates, and what I feel in my past screenings, that is really a connection that everyone has, is we're still that kid. And those things that we don't necessarily think are life-changing really are huge parts of our lives. And I want them to have fun. I want them to laugh, and I want them to feel something. And I think the language barrier too is, crosses so many other cultures, not just Native Indigenous. We have people, who say this in terms of either Asian culture or, Latin American culture about, having, that language barrier between their, whether it be their grandma or their elders. So, yeah, I want them to have fun, and I want them to be immersed in this world that they haven't seen before.
Laugh, cry, and ruin their makeup. Billy Luther, thank you so much for your time. Well said, well done, well made. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Frybread, Face and Me had its international premiere at this year's Toronto International Film Festival, and the film is currently doing the film festival circuit scene. And like I said earlier, keep your ears and eyes open for this film, Frybread, Face and Me, when it does hit streaming.
Hi, my name is Joanne Vanicola, and I'm an actor and a writer, and I was first on Rainbow Country with Mark Tara on discussing the massacre at Pulse Club in Orlando. I realized how important it was for our community to have a radio station, specifically for our issues, to talk about people in the LGBTQ community, and to provide an outlet for our stories, to discuss our politics, culture, and give voice to the issues that matter to us, and of course our artists and the things that we do globally, and talk about culture. And without people like Mark Tara providing a space for this with a radio show like this, then we wouldn't have that voice. So support, tune in. Thank you.
Phone rings. I got a message from the mayor. He's going to call me back the next day. I get the call, and he said, if you'd accept, we'd like to honor you with the key to the city. There was an event later that year in May. Just a key, right? Like, key to what? A decent job, a good singing career. It's really a metaphor, but it's history. So a reporter wants to talk to me and says, so it's a key, right? Like, what's the big deal? I said, well, not everybody gets the key. So I looked it up, and I guess it is kind of a big deal.
The date, May 17th, 2018, when trans activist Susan Gapka made history by becoming the first trans woman to be presented with the key to the city of Toronto. By the way, past recipients include Rush and the Raptors. And just like that, this little gay journey through Rainbow Country has come to an end. For the full 2-hour episode, simply head over to marktara.com, where everything is connected, and hit the archives banner. To keep up to date with the show, check out the socials at Mark Tara. The podcast is available on all major platforms. And finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember, we are living in days of making dreams come true, so believe in yourself, and the world will believe in you.
Hi everyone, this is Mark Tewksbury, Olympic champion, leader, humanitarian. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.